When I think about Roma art, I think about the feelings and the actions that it prompts within me. The Roma seem to generate strong feelings and actions amongst those around them, and difference is rare. What I'm interested in are the links between Roma artistry and the way that Roma are treated. So in my work, I formulate a theory of Gypsy visuality based on key elements within Gypsy arts, crafts, and decor. I do this by analysing artifacts made by or admired by Gypsies. My study highlights the social significance of Gypsy visual culture and its impact upon the relationship between Roma and wider society.
In the past, there's been little analysis of Gypsy visual culture. This lack of attention shows a gap in knowledge, which reflects the Roma's marginal status in society. This hiddenness fuels a universal ambivalence towards Roma. These observations, along with my own experience as a Gypsy, lead me to suggest a direct relationship between cultural visibility and cultural agency for Gypsies. A lack of visibility is reflected throughout Gypsy relations at all levels. This situation informs the climate of misunderstanding and mistrust that surrounds the Gypsy. From a young age, I learnt to camouflage my Romany identity, to hide my Gypsiness in order to avoid prejudice at school and in the wider world.
Gypsy Visuality describes a collective visual sensibility. This can also be thought of as a style that includes art, decor, dress, and other ephemera of daily life. Gypsy visual arts are reflected in a small number of collections across Europe. In the UK, the concept of art seems largely absent from traditional Romany narratives. Here the focus centres on decor and the ornamentation of home. These British collections favour the functional artefact rather than the more usual art object like painting or sculpture. Instead, paintwork and carving are shown to enrich utility objects with pattern and motif to transform them into embodiments of social narrative. This is seen most clearly in the Gypsy Caravan. This British approach contrasts European collections where the concept of the art object is more readily embraced and represented. The Museum of Ethnography in Budapest holds an extensive collection of Roma art, albeit in the basement, out of public view. The Museum of Roma Culture in the Czech Republic shows objects that it refers to as untutored art. These collections are valuable in providing a sense of reference and visibility for Roma, but how useful they are in challenging perceptions is debatable. The hidden nature of the Budapest collection and the naive focus of the Czech project risk perpetuating ideas of the gypsy as covert and infantilized, qualities that display clear parallels with the way that gypsies continue to be characterized. My own analysis of Roma artifacts and the ways in which they circulate social agency establishes a set of signs which both reflect and inform gypsiness. This re-evaluation of Roma art can also generate a new understanding of gypsy culture. In 2006, myself and Paul Ryan carried out a survey of gypsy art in the UK. Works from this were chosen to form an exhibition titled No Gorges. Gorge is a British version of gage, the word for a non-Roma person. The show presented Romany artifacts in a contemporary art setting. I analysed some exhibits from No Gorges. These included works by Jim Hayward, Paula Stanford, Celia Baker, and Simon Lee.
Two catapults by Simon Lee were shown in No Gorges. I analysed one of them, the rabbit catapult. Back to feelings and actions. How do I encounter this object? I encounter the catapult initially through a desire to see clearly the face of the rabbit that forms the handle. This makes me feel affection towards the object. However, it's soon clear that for the object to operate as a catapult, it needs to be turned upside down and swiveled away from me. This generates a conundrum that makes me question my understanding of the object. It's making me perform a mental and physical reappraisal of its potential as soon as I touch it. This call to action remains dormant while the object rests on the table. The focus here is almost completely on the artistry of portrayal and construction. But once the object is held in my hand, it shows me what to do. So after looking into the face of the rabbit and admiring its form and features, It then requires that I turn it into the enclosed fist of my right hand, where it fits snugly and comfortably. The rabbit is now turned upside down, gagged and bound in my hand. Its eyes peek from below the wrapped little finger in the direction of my potential prey, possibly its brother or sister. The catapult embodies its prey and its mode of execution. The expressive wit of Lee's carving lay precisely in the play of violent power relations enacted in the cause and effect of the catapult. These power relations are amplified by the catapult in action, where the dignified rabbit is assaulted by my hand, and made captive and inverted to resemble its future hanging dead self. The sophistication and eloquence of the catapult lay in the interplay between its complex references and its call to action. The black leather band that will hold the stone missile requires that I lift and pull towards me in order to feel the flex and tension of the rubber as it stretches between my outstretched arm and my drawn back hand. The catapult sets out an instinctive performance in the user. I flip from playful admirer to focused hunter and back again, as directed by the object. The findings from my No Gorgeous study established some common elements of Gypsy visuality for the first time. These included flashiness, allure, enchantment, entrapment, ornament, functionality, diversion, discordance, and contingency. These qualities of Gypsy style both reflect and inform Roma culture, and in so doing allow a new understanding of the social relations that surround Roma communities. My own art practice often includes discordant marriages of image and message. These objects distill the findings from my No Gorgeous analyses further to reflect and amplify a Gypsy aesthetic. By reformulating the recurrent elements of Gypsy visuality, I have generated new interpretations of it. These new interpretations include glamour, interruption, disorientation, and reflection. These findings can be seen as a condensation of Gypsy visuality, allowing new access to its meaning, and therefore a new understanding of Roma culture. The implications of these findings are tested during the development of my Looking Glass works and my Blanket series. Surveillance blanket is a sheet of clear polythene gilded in 1-inch bands of silvered leaf. The blanket is made to echo lower-grade surveillance technologies or striped mirrors, which draw upon the more sophisticated one-way mirrors that occupy police interrogation suites. The voyeuristic potential in these objects is clear, to see but not be seen. The blanket can be considered a soft painting or a sculptural membrane. This work can be easily transported in a small suitcase. Stacked panels give a makeshift impression. Objects in limbo. Actors between acts. A visitor shifts the panels around to get a better view of those underneath. My installations occupy a threshold between concealment and revelation, between disguise and display. They present an experience of arresting disarray, an eye-catching fragmentation that seeks out the contradictions between message and medium to question the contingent nature of meaning. The shifter is prompted to action by the provisional tone of the works and the questions they pose about objects and the spaces they occupy. Expectation is subverted. Authorship, authenticity, and authority questioned. The urge to act drives the performances that take place before the duplicated, reversed, and broken reflections. These performances show the viewer acting upon artifacts in response to the artifacts having acted upon them. By responding to the artifact, the viewer responds to the agency of the artist. This oscillation of influence between artist, artifact, and viewer amplifies the pattern of influence that takes place between persons and things, and between persons via things. If we consider, as the anthropologist Alfred Gell suggests, that artifacts are the equivalent of persons and vice versa in their status and function as social agents, it follows that Gypsy Visuality can be considered the equivalent of Roma communities in terms of the social relations that they generate.
This means that one both reflects and represents the other. Therefore, any new understanding of the Gypsy aesthetic represents a new understanding of Roma culture.
By distilling and amplifying a Roma aesthetic, my artworks manipulate the conflicting qualities of display and concealment inherent in Gypsy style.
These paradoxical devices of Roma visuality, originally cultivated as methods of defense, also bring with them a sense of displacement. This points to the Roma having fallen prey to the very mechanisms developed to protect themselves.
The ambivalent character of a Gypsy aesthetic is echoed in popular perceptions of Roma, where romantic and demonized images compete to generate a fractured identity.
The internalization of this conflicted image results in a conundrum of identity. The Roma are consequently seen as contingent in nature, not just in the public eye, but also amongst themselves, a makeshift sensibility which has its roots in nomadism.
Gypsy style mirrors the behavior of its communities to articulate a set of relations that characterize Roma's social agency. In doing so, Gypsy Visuality both reflects and perpetuates a state of marginality. Understanding these mechanisms offers new insight into Gypsy culture and the possibility of alternative encounters for Roma communities.
I'd like to talk to you today about my encounters with the work of Suzye Llwyd.
Suzye Llwyd is a Roma artist, or Gypsy artist, who lives and works in Ireland.
She also makes artworks under the name Killi Mengri, or just Killi.
I first saw her work when I was co-curating No Gorges with Daniel Baker.
No Gorges set out to exhibit examples of visual art production that we had found in the UK Roma community, not necessarily by people who thought of themselves as artists.
We decided to show how these works worked in a white cube gallery environment, so that they could be viewed without the accompanying context or descriptions of their origin from the Gypsy community.
The Romany origins of the work were only revealed on the way out of the exhibition, not on the invites or posters.
Daniel had found images of Suzye Llwyd's drawings on the internet, and we agreed that they must be exhibited in some way.
The piece of work consisted of an A4 sketchbook containing 14 pen and ink drawings of the Stations of the Cross. We projected scans of these drawings like this. What did I think this object was? Well, I thought it was clearly an example of religious art. But did the work exist as our projection, the book belonging to the vicar, or my commissioned version of it? Was it paper or light, multiple or single? Perhaps the work was best thought of simply as a set of ink drawings, illustrations or cartoons. But then even the perforations at the top of the pages interested me. Some of these had been casually cropped during Killi's scanning. She had signed and dated each page as if they might one day find themselves separated from the book, as is often the case with sketchbook pages. Why was I attracted to the style of these drawings? They were descriptive and also symbolic in how they conveyed meaning. Was my interest aimed at Christ and how he was depicted here, or was my interest in Suzye Llwyd? Or was it something of myself that I found in the works that engaged me? After all, my own practice as an artist revolves around sketchbooks, the aesthetics of a page or groups of pages, as opposed to the sheet of paper. I was now involved with solving problems of sharing Killi's book rather than my own. How should they be photographed? Was scanning better? What was being copied? Lines? Yes, partly. But also the mimetic images of Christ and the people and angels that attended to him. Did I believe in him? Was faith even important here? Perhaps the real matter were the scratches and scribbles, the careful numbering and ordering of the images that represented the account of the order of events. And colour, or lack of it, why only red and black? What did the repeating icons mean? Were they becoming symbols across the multiple pages of the book? Was this Suzye's devotional practice during her act of creation? It all seemed complicated and yet looked simple. A simple sketchbook.
Of course, I know sketchbooks are rarely simple. I'm an artist myself. perhaps a little jealous of these works. I'm also an academic. I've studied semiotics. American semiotics, that is. Not so sure, but the semiotic of Charles Sanders Peirce. I can analyze how meaning is generated between me and Suzye's book as sets of sign types. As an audience I can be childlike, mesmerized, poised with my crayons to color these drawings in, or adult-like, like someone who uses sketchbooks themselves, and inquires into their meaning, sympathetic. But am I an atheist or a Christian, or agnostic, or just curious? I have to admit that I am a man, Suzye is a woman. I am also in this instance a curator. How do my philosophical inclinations affect all of this? They are stoical. Does sexuality have a part to play? The religious history of my family. After all, my grandmother was a Roman Catholic, who took me around the Stations of the Cross, in a church, in my hometown of Leicester in the middle of England. Perhaps this is just Freudian religious cherry-picking. So, let's talk about death. Is this about death or prophecy? Mankind or Godkind? Am I contemplating the suffering of a man, or the suffering of the divine? Can the divine suffer?
Maybe I'm just looking for something to talk about, an example for my research. Why am I interested in Roma art production anyway? I'm 43 years old. I think Suzye is older. I know Daniel is older. Do they seem more confident than me? Is there a Roma confidence? Is that a question about ethics?
Qualisigns. These works were very attractive to me, in that they seemed to be a particularly successful series in new ways. In a genre with a clear tradition and history, Stations of the Cross, to achieve something fresh in this context, admirable. Clarity, freshness, simplicity, immediacy, control, confidence, style, understanding.
Crushed, wounds, blood, Pontius Pilate, crowd, crown of thorns, crossbeam and roots, people, Mary, Simon of Cyrene, Saint Veronica and handkerchief, gambling, suffering, death, descent from the cross, tomb, shroud, time, running of blood, relics.
Reims. I have a connection with this subject in that it was set for an exam at school. I sense that I failed to achieve anything of value, whereas Killi succeeds. That spikes my sense of being impressed. The images are casually cropped in their scanning photography, which neither hides nor amplifies the sketchbook source. Via the edges, and especially the visible wire spiral binding along the top edge, my particular interest. Each page is signed and dated, and numbered, reminding me of Robert Motherwell's Dealer sketchbook, but I think the signatures indicate different things here. For Motherwell, they seem to me to indicate a sense of market value, but for Llwyd, genuine self-confidence.
Sin signs, tokens. The red is a token of what the red pen has done, scratching across the back of the figure of Christ with the nib, scratching the body or paper, causing blood or ink to be left there. The red, colour embodied in the ink, records where blood or ink is deposited on the cross, shroud, floor, earth, or their representations on the page. Is there a sense of the artist's enactment of causing the wounds to the figure as a token of the artist's devotion or faith? Indices. A chemical breakdown of the materials used, perhaps even of the optics of the projections. The spiral binding winds through punctured pages, mirroring the subject of Christ's puncture wounds. The white paper, Percy's sheet of assertion, has strong black assertive lines which depict both mimetically and symbolically. The position of Christ's head is expressive of mood because it is indexically linked to how we hold our own heads. Decents. I am familiar with these books and their paper. I am familiar with the language of these marks, although I could not have made them. A sense of unfortunately here. I believe this is the work of an intelligent person with depth of feeling and understanding. My feelings on this matter are beyond criticism, although whether this is true concerning this artist is also subject to the opinions of others. So far Dino Alfier, Daniel Baker and Malcolm Quinn concur. I accept further evidence might destabilise these beliefs. I would hypothesise that I would need to be in a very composed, contemplative, focused state to execute a series of drawings approaching this tenor and consistency. Legisigns, types. The work seems to be consistent with types of personal, general, devotional image making. The purpose of the general type is to strengthen and develop faith and understanding, rather than to develop technical skill, although this may develop as a matter of course. The signatures signify a transition into a type of fine art production through an evaluation by the artist, their decision to sign, with which I concur or confirm in my appreciation as an interpreter or an audience, despite my reservations concerning signing artworks. This work uses a type of simple imagery which here seems to hide a sophistication. This apparent dichotomy or paradox takes the work into a rarer type, or a less populated group. Hence here we have a case of a truncated sign, truncating that sign which indicates sophistication, amplifying that very sign for the perceptive interpreter. Matisse reflexively and successfully truncated this sign of sophisticatedness. Also, many grouped circles equals a crowd. Red lines equals cuts or slashes. The patterns of red lines persists from one drawing to another, but that the blood spreads symbolises continuity and time passing, as does the blood running as it drips down the cross. The forward movement of the head from drawing numbers 11 to 12 symbolises death, almost frame by frame animation here. This is also appreciated indexically because we all have heads. Peculiar use of symbols. Christ's face is never depicted, except upon the representations of the relics, that is the handkerchief and the shroud. There is a symbolization of the heavenly, through lack of contact with the ground. Christ floats, except where contact with the earth seems to be specified by the narrative, in Numbers 7, 9 and 10. The expected symbol of the cross has been changed to a T shape. Is this a more historically accurate shape? Simon of Cyrene has black hands, Libya being in North Africa.
Arguments.
Arguments. From the perspective of a semiotician interested in ethics, how do Llwyd's Stations of the Cross generate meanings around both simplicity and sophistication in the same works?
Concluding comments.
I commissioned Suzye Llwyd to make for me a version of the Stations of the Cross sketchbook.
What did it mean for me to do this?
I wanted to communicate my appreciation of the work that was exhibited in No Gorges, and I wanted to learn more about the artist who'd made these drawings.
I also wanted to know how much of what I was appreciating was consciously intended by the artist.
It turned out that Llwyd was very knowledgeable about her subject matter and fully aware of the meanings I had interpreted, and these had been consciously aimed at.
I believe that Llwyd will occupy an important position in the history of Roma art when it is eventually written.
Hierarchies of collecting are institutionalized over time.
Inquiry can destabilize beliefs that support value systems that are no longer appropriate.
Roma art is a good example of a history of artworks deserving of hierarchical reappraisal, because any well-conducted inquiry into that hierarchy would, I believe, reveal that this particular body of works continues to be positioned lower along that scale for reasons historically founded in expressions of racial exclusion.
Is it possible to get one, maybe? May I take one?